Good evening, everybody, and lovely to see everyone here this evening at the AGM. And I have a few words for you this evening. And as you know, every year I stand here. And since the last time I was in this sort of very spot a year ago, I can think back on many special moments in school. The one that will live longest in the memory, we have already referenced this evening, was the beautiful summer's day back in June when the sky was blue and the sun shone. The hum of conversation and play could be heard right across the field, and the community, past and present, came together to celebrate our 125th anniversary. As with all the best moments, the lead up was an important part of the process. At times, it was intense, at other times, entertaining. To see the school's history come to life in our beautiful and unique 125 book, copies still for sale over there, and in our magnificent archive exhibition was hugely rewarding and moving. So as someone who has studied history, I always felt a little self-conscious that I did not know more about our past. I'd always wondered, for example, why our founders had settled on the name of King Alfred. Here is a figure, more often than not, confused with King Arthur. No, he did not have a round table, but yes, he did burn the cakes. Whilst that at least I knew, this was an opportunity to dig deeper. So, tracking back to 1897, the country was building up to the 1000th or millennial anniversary of his death in 899. He was high in the public consciousness as a symbol of British greatness, being the only English monarch to ever be awarded the epithet of great. Like all historical figures, his reign is open to multiple interpretations, but certain ideas were powerful in the late Victorian era of complex industrialization, urbanization, social and political change. His reinstatement of the Witan, or Barons' Council, was seen as an early sign of England's distinct and admirable democratic tradition. His translation of the law codes into Old English and their distribution around the country was seen as his commitment to a just and fair society. His translation of parts of the Bible, opening of new schools, and employment of tutors for his 3 daughters, rare at that time, and of course after whom our 3 boats are named, was seen to embody his passion for education. Although there is a caveat here, because in a medieval Christian context, the reason he was so committed to it is because he believed the Viking invasion was a punishment from God due to the ignorance of the people. He was seen as a leader who had brought about the revival of the nation in its darkest hour of struggle against the heathen Vikings, guiding it from adversity to triumph, from ignorance to wisdom, from darkness to light. His image, as we would all recognise, sits front and centre in our logo, which we can see up there if you need a reminder. Created by Charles Voysey, the eminent arts and craft designer and theorist of the late 19th and early 20th century, it has always intrigued me. There is Alfred, spelt out in Old English, with a jumbled up combination of seemingly the wrong letters. Don't know if anyone else has ever noticed that. There is a picture of the king himself, complete with crown, on the surface, not very democratic, and holding a Bible, on the surface, not very non-religious. Next to his staff is a strange symbol with an N attached to a D, with an O in the middle. It turns out this is a monogram spelling Londinia, taken from one side of a penny cast when Alfred conquered the capital from the Danes in 886. And then, of course, often placed just underneath the logo is our motto, Ex Cordia Vita, traditionally translated as out of the heart springs life. Somewhat to my surprise, I discovered that it had a biblical origin. It is taken from the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 23, the same book, incidentally, that King Alfred holds up in the logo, although a different verse. Originally in biblical Hebrew, the words were translated into Greek and then into Latin and then into English. But let us dwell for a moment on the motto itself in Latin. So, I don't know how many people here studied Latin at school, but as I'm sure most of us could probably work out, ex means out of, as in exit. Corde is the origin of words such as coronary and means heart. Vita, meanwhile, means life, such as in Fellini's La Dolce Vita, and gives us words such as vitality. Now, interestingly, there is no verb. So instead of out of the heart springs life, it could instead be translated as out of the heart springs of life, or more simply, out of the heart life. Alternatively, one can think differently about the word corda. And I'm grateful to Judith, our classics teacher, and also to Al's dad, who is an eminent scholar of biblical Hebrew, for explaining that in classical times, the concept of heart was understood differently to today. When I hear heart, I instinctively think of it as the seat of emotion. Back then, it was also seen to be the seat of intellect, wisdom, and judgment. Some have linked the word corde to the word core, embodying the notion of essence or innermost being or even soul. So we could take ex cordia vita and perfectly reasonably translate it as out of the core life. Now, this last translation I personally find the most compelling. It is optimistic and creative, encouraging each individual to discover and express who they really are. And the source of life for every person will be different and also may change over time. And the motto elegantly allows this to be recognised. Its simplicity leaves plenty to the imagination. It also speaks to what I've come to understand is the sort of superpower of our school. And beyond that, it's a gateway into what I see as the fundamental principle of education. So the person I think who describes this most eloquently is the late educationalist Sir Ken Robinson. And in many of his writings, he uses the metaphor of a garden where the school is the soil. The learners grow from seeds into the flowers and trees and plants that are inherent in their nature. Occasionally a sapling may struggle. The answer here is obviously not to reject it because it does not fit the expected path. Rather, it is to nurture it by understanding what can be adapted in the conditions to make it flourish. Maybe it needs more sun or less. Maybe more water or less. Maybe more love or less. And Ken Robinson contrasts this to a factory system where the outputs are weighed and assessed and standardised, and there is inevitably little room for individuality. It's a cookie-cutter process which enables the system to be efficient and measurable, and which is primarily designed to meet the perceived needs of society more than the learners themselves. A few years ago, one of our now parents gave a TEDx talk on a similar theme, using the metaphor of a fish tank, and some people may remember that. If your fish are unhealthy, first take a look at the water they are swimming in. So over time, I've come to understand that this is our greatest strength. We create an environment where plants can grow, fish can swim, young people can thrive. We give our students the freedom to be themselves and to find out over time who they really are. In other words, ex cordia vita, from the core, life. As everyone here probably appreciates, it is a more complex journey than a conventional environment. The more the path is opened up and the less it is buckled down, the more room there is for highs and lows, ups and downs. Freedom allows moments of struggle as well as success. But I think, as Nick intimated earlier, the results can always be seen by the end of the journey. It is really then that you see all the pieces falling into place in a young person. And there's no doubt in my mind that patience is required. Only when it is ready will the plant blossom in its true fullness. It would be a mistake, however, to think of this as some kind of crude rewilding exercise where nature is simply left to itself. Learning will not happen without well-structured curriculums and pedagogies and assessment. Personal development will not happen without clear boundaries carefully held, and empathetic support to help each student to learn to take responsibility for themselves. Thriving cannot happen without strong structure underpinning the freedom. And this really calls to mind my somewhat ambivalent response to the motto when I first arrived. I loved the warmth and welcome of KASS, but I knew it needed a stronger spine. And I was worried, quite frankly, at the time, that by emphasising things other than the heart, that would be seen to go against the ethos and would lead me into trouble. Understanding now that the classical view of the heart encompasses emotion and intellect and wisdom makes me far more at ease with ex cordia vita and has enabled me to appreciate it in a whole new light. Inherent in the garden metaphor is the notion that we at KASS are fundamentally a relational place, not a transactional one. We do not conceive of a system where children are inputs and say exam results are outputs. And sadly, this has become the underlying premise on which much of England's education system is now based. I sense that this grew somewhat by accident and tipped from well-intentioned good ideas to something that was damaging. Increasing accountability, driving up standardised scores, creating guidance on lessons are all positive ideas in themselves, but then they went way too far in the way they were implemented. Bureaucratic processes meant that they became the aims of the system rather than the means to improve it. Increasingly, the human element was lost. Witness the dramatic fall in national student attendance that has been plastered over the media. Witness the ongoing teacher retention crisis, which is impacting schools and pupils up and down the country. And witness the impact of an Ofsted system where a dedicated community head teacher tragically ended up taking her own life. Education ultimately has to have people at its centre. And for me, this takes us back to the character of King Alfred. And I love the fact that he was seen as an engine of revival. He breathed new life into a broken nation, and it was that appealed to the founders. They dreamed of educational revival leading to national revival, and they saw KASS as one of the key engines to make that happen. Today, as we've mentioned a little bit already this evening, we continue to honour this intention by reaching out beyond our gates. We are seeking to give more young people a taste of the best of what KASS has to offer via bursaries, events and partnerships. We are codifying and sharing with other schools our carefully developed values-based practices ranging from inquiry-based learning to digital portfolios and school-directed courses to the village. And we are joining with others to amplify the voice that says the system needs rebalancing with the KASS-defined heart at its centre. So, to finish, I'd really want to say that I feel this is a time when what we do here is extremely important. As already we've mentioned this evening, political change is most probably on its way, and that will create an opportunity for the education pendulum to swing back to something more human-centred. And not only do we need to provide our own students with the very best experience, which is a hallmark of what we do and absolutely necessary to remain successful as a school, but we need to show others that it can be done in practice. And we need to join with and empower all those who share this vision. So, by working together, let us hope that in a year's time, at the next AGM, we are seeing the beginning of a new King Alfred inspired educational era with the inherent humanity of ex cordia vita at its heart. Thank you.